As you said at the start of the bulletin, 5 Live will of course keep you across all of that.
Thanks, Carthy.
Carthy, thank you. How much physical contact is acceptable between a pupil and a teacher? If students are upset, should teachers comfort them, or is any contact too much?
Well, according to the neurologist Professor Francis McGlone, educators who are too scared to even give children a reassuring pat on the shoulder are guilty of abuse. Well, he joins us in the studio along with Executive Head Teacher of the Education and Leadership Trust, Patsy Kane. Welcome, both of you, to the programme this morning. Professor McGlone, this is quite a statement to make. If you were dealing with a teacher who was very cautious about potentially false allegations being made against them, could you really turn around to them and say, this is child abuse because you're not touching a pupil?
I think the comment really is going the other way, excuse me, from the extreme neglect that is happening now in the fact that children can't be touched, and how that fear got predicated, and really is an irrational fear that touch is actually very rewarding and reassuring for a child. And now you're living in a society where it's been demonised. And what our research is showing, and others, that there's a population of nerves in the skin that have evolved specifically to respond to gentle stroking touch. And they play a profound role in the developing social brain. So children that aren't nurtured and touched will grow up to be very stressed and anxious. So everything comes down to the fact that we've identified a mechanism that drives this response to gentle touch. So it's not the kind of touch that you feel when you're consciously touched. This system of nerves feeds in information that is more feeling than sensing.
Can you tell us more about the science there? What's happening to the brain then when those nerves are stimulated?
Well, the skin, excuse me, the skin has a whole load of sensory receptors in it that tell your brain about temperature, itch, pain is the one that we know most about, touch. Those nerves transmit information that guide you in terms of what's happened, who's touched you. These population of nerves that respond to gentle touch are called C fibres, and C fibres respond very slowly to a stimulus. The best example really, if you touch a hot plate and burn yourself, the first pain system will get you out of there quickly, but then you'll know if you've done that, a couple of seconds later, you know, the emotional side of pain begins to hit you. We've discovered the same system for touch. So there's a first touch system that tells you you've been touched, but depending on that type of touch and the context, there's this feeling comes in, and that's what this population of nerve fibres responds specifically to gentle touch.
OK, but if you're getting physical comfort from your parents at home on a daily basis, or your carer, your grandparents, does it matter if your teachers don't give you a pat on the shoulder during the day?
I just think in that kind of context, this kind of reassurance is actually part of that whole interaction between the carer outside the role of the family. And there's no harm in that, you know. And research has shown that that gentle touch on the shoulder can have a dramatic effect on the way that child behaves. It's just a very biological thing to do. And all we're saying is a mechanism that it clearly indicates that that kind of gentle touch is having a direct impact on a child's behaviour.
So, Patsy, there's a science to it. What do you tell your staff?
We'd advise them as far as possible not to touch with students, but we do have a huge emphasis on creating safe, inclusive, warm atmospheres around school and in the classroom, because I totally agree students need to feel safe, they need to feel pleasure in learning, they need to feel support if they find learning difficult. So there's lots of strategies we would use in school to make students feel safe, happy and nurtured, but I think the social context, and many students are aware of their physical space, they're highly aware of it, and they would find even the touch you gave me quite intrusive and would feel uncomfortable in school if teachers started touching them. Many would.
Let me read you what the Department for Education guidance is. Schools should not have a no policy. That's a double negative, but they're saying you should have a touch. It's often necessary or desirable for a teacher to touch a child, but the same guidance says false allegations have been made against 1 in 4 school staff by a pupil, and 1 in 6 have had an allegation made by a member of a pupil's family. So it's all well and good saying you should touch children, but there is a risk to it, and many teachers are not prepared to take that risk anymore.
There is that context. It depends. I'm not sure from your research if that's a normal part of learning. If a child was sobbing in a corner or looking really distressed or hurt or limping in a corridor, your immediate response is to help them. That would be, you know, looking after them in that way, but that would be in an open space. There would be a clear reason to do that. I'm not sure, from what you've said, how much that is part and parcel of being in the classroom.
But there might be a distinction, might there? Because I would think it might be all right. I mean, you can argue the toss on this, but it might be all right to touch a primary school children. Secondary school children, they have a space, and if you come across that space, they do resent it.
I was talking with the primary head teacher last night before coming on, just to say, and again, she would be very wary of encouraging staff to touch children too much. But I do think we've got to make students feel safe in school, welcome, and have warm, positive relations with the people who are teaching them.
We've had so much contact from our viewers about this morning. Just briefly, Professor, is this partly because we live now in effectively quite a highly sexualised society and touch is associated with sexual contact? Is that something we need to look at?
Yeah, the background now is sort of the litigative area that's surrounding touch. You know, we need to look at perceived risk. You know, we need to be far more rational about what the risk is, assess it, and then try and understand how important touch is, and then, you know, legislate appropriately and not this culture of fear.
Okay.
We've had lots of views in, as Rachel was saying. Just before I let you go, maybe this is the solution to it. Emma Sanford writes in, I think she's a teacher, she says, I just ask, do you need a hug? And if they say yes, they get one. If they say no, then I don't.
Yeah.
You have to be wary, because some of the more vulnerable students might be desperate for a hug, but they might be much more vulnerable to misinterpreting that hug and getting very confused messages. So it's just not straightforward.
No, it's not. No.
Thank you very much.
Fascinating subject.
Yeah, and lots of people, as I say, getting in contact this morning. If you want to have your say, please go to the BBC Breakfast Facebook page as well. And this is where we say goodbye to Christian. He's off to read the news on the Andrew Marr Show.